folks, how are you? Who is having the best time? I would be in that batch as well. So I'm going to take a few minutes and share a little bit about who I am and why I'm up here, and share a little bit about this format right here, who this goofball is, and how we know each other, and we're going to have some fun. So my name is Marlon Miller. If there's any kids out there, my head is in fact not a tomato, just so you're aware. And so I'll give you a little bit of background on what we do, and I'm just going to go really quick. So this is going to be a bullet point, 30,000 foot thing. Here we go. So my wife and I, Lisa, have adopted all 4 of our children, and our oldest is he's on the autistic spectrum, and he lives in a group home now. He's 19.7. That's a little bit of an autistic joke right there. I'm sorry. So our other 3 children all have Down syndrome, and we just have done, it's been a real joy to see what the Lord has done with our family and our work, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in 2 seconds. But 10, 11 years ago, my wife and I wanted to do something in print. We are tired of our phones. We have been for a long time, and we love books and print and paper and everything that's real and authentic. Amen to that. So anyway, so we started a magazine 10, 11 years ago called Plain Values. I'm sure that you can see that from the back. I'm sorry. But Plain Values really at the heart is about living in authentic community. We think it is best to have those conversations that are hard, that mean something. If I can preach for 2 seconds, I'll jump off my soapbox in those 2 seconds. But I don't think there's a better and more realistic manifestation of this kind of adoption than this kind of adoption. That's why we're here. So we started the magazine. We talk about the beauty of kids that have special needs. We talk about the dignity of kids that have special needs and the beauty of adoption. We talk about all kinds of ministry stuff. It is a monthly print magazine. Sorry to pop my peas there. I apologize. We also do have a digital side. We actually started publishing the magazine for our Amish friends and neighbors. I grew up Amish myself. We live in the middle of the Amish settlement, capital of the world in Holmes County, Ohio. And ich bin ze Dutch as any helper schunst. So I can talk Dutch. Ivan happens to be our next door neighbor. And we have seen some incredibly wonderful things happen since their family has moved in. It's been a real joy. So I'll go back to one other thing. When we started publishing our magazine, I told my wife that I want to see one kid with Down syndrome be adopted into his or her forever family because of our work. And praise the Lord, we have been able through a nonprofit that we started a couple years ago to actually pour money and bring awareness to kids that are overseas, that are stuck in just nasty orphanages. We've been able to see about 28 kids with Down syndrome and other special needs find their forever family. So praise the Lord. It has been a real joy. So who here has gone through the school? Have you guys all gone through the school and seen what Rory and Rebecca and everybody has built here? So, okay, I'll back up a little bit. I'm sorry. I probably have ADD. I don't want to have myself diagnosed, but anyway, moving on. There's squirrels, everywhere. So we met Rory a few years ago through Joel Salatin, and I met Joel in Ohio at a farm thing, and Joel has actually started to write for our magazine every month, as has Rory. And Joel introduced our magazine and our family to Rory, or Rory to our I don't know. You get the idea. So, where was I going with that? I don't know. There you go. Thank you. So, Lisa and I have been down here, a handful of times. And with our kids, public school is not a great option. We've been homeschooling all these years, but we have yearned for a long time to build something just like Hardison Mill. And in the fall of this last year, we actually were able to buy for, just a little bit of money, the bones of an 1850 one-room schoolhouse out of Cincinnati. So we trucked it up. I'm going to go salesman on you for 2 seconds here, and so in just a little bit. So we trucked it up. We're in the process right now of rebuilding that little one-room schoolhouse into a functioning one-room schoolhouse. Our 3 kids are going to go there. We're going to find a teacher. It's going to be fantastic. Rory is kind enough, and he's going to come up in the middle of June, which is like 2 weeks away, but he's going to do a couple fundraisers for us for our school, and he's going to hang out up there for the whole week of the 19th and 20th through the end of that week. It's going to be a blast. So the way that these 2 guys met is the first time that Rory was in our neck of the woods. We actually introduced them. We took them over to Ivan and Emma's house, and I think you and Heather were there for 2 or 3 hours, right? And they just became good friends as well. And so they've stayed in touch. And we did this little round table thing last year, and I think it went over rather well. It was a lot of fun. So we're doing it again this year. They are going to have a wonderful conversation, and I don't really know if you're going to take questions from...
We are, and you're going to help us.
I'm going to help. There you go. So if I can I'm going to tie up the thing on Plain Values. Our booth is on the other side over by the milk cow and the barn. And we actually have a couple show specials going on right now. If you like the idea, if you get behind the concept that our culture is half insane or nearly all the way insane, you might really enjoy Plain Values. We talk about a lot of different stuff. We have a wonderful column written by a lady that happens to be a widow. We talk about loss. Do you guys remember I said we talk about the hard things? We really do try to have authentic conversation around the hard things in life. I think it's one thing that needs a lot more focus inside the church. So with that, I'm done. I'm going to hand the mic to Ivan.
Thank you, Marlon. Marlon, can you hand me your magazines real quick? I've been writing for Marlon's magazine for the last year and a half. And this is one of the ones where me and my daughter, Indiana, are on the cover. It's all about education in our little schoolhouse. This one, Ivan is on the cover, which means he's not on the cover. Which the reason I bring that up is because we don't take pictures of the Amish. The Amish don't take pictures, do we? Not really. Do you have a like a smartphone filled with like selfies and stuff? You don't have any of that, do you? I know what you have. You have a flip phone like I do. But that brings it up, like he actually writes for the magazine, but there are no photos of Ivan and his family, or really any Amish photos in there of people. Let's start with, why don't we take pictures, or why do you shy away from either taking pictures or being in pictures?
Sure. You didn't tell me you were going to ask this question.
Well, I didn't know I was till now. This is pretty much what the whole thing's going to be, just so you know.
I think I'm getting out of here. So it's been a cultural thing, and it probably leads back to the 10 Commandments, that we don't want to make any graven images. That's the way that we've been taught. And for me, it's just, I feel uncomfortable, posing and taking pictures and having them posted out there. I don't say it's a sin or anything like that, but that's been kind of the cultural thing. Culturally, within Amish, though, it's a kind of a rule of thumb. You just don't do photos, right? You just don't do pictures, because it's graven images. That's the idea. Now, we have graven images ourselves, but that means we don't take good pictures. We don't like how we look in them. How many of you all were here last year when Ivan and I, and who was with us? Mike Klein. Again, your hands. So most of you are brand new. If you're like me and a lot of people, I'm fascinated by the Amish. There's a booth right over there called Dirt and Devotion, which is a T-shirt booth, and I've become friends with them, and they're really, really wonderful. They made a T-shirt for me that we kind of partnered on this year.
But one of the ones I wanted them to make, and we didn't get time to do it, is called Amish-ish. You are Amish, I am Amish-ish. And I tell you, I'm fascinated by your culture more and more as time goes on. I was interested and fascinated before. Actually, the better way to describe it is I am so incredibly inspired by your culture. Now, I know there are things that are problems, and you have your own things within your own communities and all that sort of stuff. But just that you can maintain your own culture in spite of this incredible, enormous push towards everything moving faster and faster, and you guys are still trotting along on a horse, most of you. I think it's just incredibly inspiring. So that's one of the reasons I'm excited that you're here. You're willing to come. You did not get in your car and drive here. Explain how you got here and how you have to get long distances or most places.
So for those of you who heard the talk yesterday, we don't drive a car. We drive a horse and buggy. And I said we had a really fast horse coming down here. But what we do is, and we've looked at things over time, we look at it as, we try and view things as they come along, and we view them from a spiritual and a family perspective. How will it affect our spiritual life, and how will it affect our family life? So back in the 1915, 20s, and 30s, when Henry Ford was cranking out the Model A's and the Model T's, our forefathers determined that if we drive a car, the ease of coming and going is going to be a lot easier, and it's going to speed up our life, and it's going to probably hurt our family unit. So they chose to continue with the horse and buggy, and that's what we've continued with. So, but they've also seen as society grows and moves that we can't stay, we can't go everywhere we need to go with a horse and buggy. So there's a network of taxi drivers in our communities that will pick up the phone and we'll call them and say, are you available such and such day at such a time to bring us down here? And we hired a guy, 15-passenger van, and he brought us down here. So he's here, and we'll be leaving back out here this afternoon at 4 or 5 o'clock.
On Thursday, I took my daughter to Lawrenceburg to meet my older girls, because Indiana was spending the weekend with them because it's so busy here. That way I could have more time. But when I stopped on the way back in Lawrenceburg, there's an Amish community right near there. I went into the grocery store, into Kroger, and as I was walking in, there's these two Amish ladies standing next to their carts. And they saw that I was in the schoolhouse 15-passenger van. And they said, could you give us a ride? I'm not very good with Amish speech, but it wasn't like there was an accent involved, and they thought that I was a driver for the Amish. Probably because I look like a driver for the Amish, maybe. Well, a couple of the things about what you just said that are interesting to me. Number one is that your forefathers decided that it was easier, having a car was easier, and somehow someone somewhere decided that easier wasn't better. There is nothing that I can think of in our society and culture when someone doesn't think easier is better. Easier is always better. In our culture, like, no one says, oh, that's easier, that might not be good for us. How has that, what created, how did that become something, because it's not just with that. It isn't really a matter of just that cars make it easier. It's across the board. There's something within your society that has decided whatever is easier, that's the first thing we have to question and say, but is it better? And where does that come from? Is it biblical again?
It would be, yes. I would see that as being biblical in just, when we look at things, I like to talk about creating a vision. In Proverbs 29:18, it tells us, where there is no vision, people perish. And in our society, if we don't have a vision of where we want to go, we're going to lose what we have, because our natural instinct just takes us down the easy route. It just gravitates to the same way that water flows. So we try and have a vision of where do we want to go down the road, and will this affect negatively or positively the decision that we make?
Yeah. And ultimately, your reason for not driving a car isn't really a technology problem. It's mostly that at the end of the day, the car will separate you from your family, right? And it's similar with a lot of technology, not your family, but your community. If a horse will only go 15 miles or whatever the distance happens to be in a day, and that keeps you within your community just naturally, where that's one of the reasons you don't have internet, or you don't get online, and you don't have it in your homes or anything like that, is because you are trying to protect your community, right? It's not really that the technology is good or bad or any of those things. It's that for you to be able to leave that and to be anywhere and everywhere, what that can do for you will cause disintegration within your community, right?
It does. And if we look at the car, and kind of the way that it has networked our communities so our church district is a congregation that's within a 4 or 5 mile radius. So my neighbors, we go to the same church. We're neighbors, we're community, we're sharing everything together. Whereas if we have a car and now we're spread out, yeah, we can get back and forth easier and we can get together, but I may not find out 5 miles down the road that a church family had a catastrophe or something like that. But we're right neighbors, so we're sharing. And it's the same way with the online community. There's something about that interpersonal connection where you build that relationship face to face. You look somebody in the eye, you feel their pain, you hear their challenges, where it just brings that community down to real life. And that's what we've chosen to try and stay away from, is that online community, and try and keep it within our, the relationships, the neighbors, the interpersonal communities.
When I got to Marlon's house, his family was Amish, and when he was a little boy, they left the Amish community. And so he's grown up pretty much outside of it, but all of his extended family is Amish, and of course his next door neighbor is. And his house was exactly the same as all of our houses, but when we went over to your house, yours looked the same. It's a big brick home, kind of an American Western brick home. But when I got inside, you had done unusual things to it in order to make it an Amish house. You had removed the telephone pole from it. There's no electricity. You had to take it out of it, right? You had to take the central heat and air out of it. Again, somehow, something inside their culture said, it will be better for us not to have air conditioning, not to have electricity. It's incredible. I mean, it really is incredible, and it is better in many senses of it. But that, as you and I, because I thought that was fascinating to come in and just see, because I figured you all lived in white houses and they never had electricity and you just never got it. I didn't realize you might buy a new house and then you just remove all of the American, the English things from it. You were telling me that these are not like rules that come down necessarily from all the leaders where you have to do it this way. It's mostly, it's encouraged to make a lot of these decisions, but they're really about families making their decisions, right?
It is, and we have rules, guidelines, whatever you want to call them, where they're reviewed, and sometimes some of the things are okayed that weren't, because we see that things are coming along, but we're not out there as a police force and looking in everybody's homes, making sure everybody's abiding by these rules, because we feel that as a culture, it's a choice. We're not forcing anybody in this, and we look at the guidelines and some of these things as a protection to keep us living the lifestyle that we enjoy to live. So if we're policing it, we're forcing it onto the people, and there's really no reason that you want to be living in the culture if you don't want to live and abide by the guidelines.
Right. Yeah. I think that's really, really, really special. We talked about this. I had heard this joke here at home. Someone had said that in 2020, or during the time of COVID, that the Amish actually never got the coronavirus. And they said that the reason they never got it is because they don't have televisions. And I think the reality is probably not that you didn't get it, it's just that you didn't fear it the way that we fear it, because we're just constantly aware of it, and we're being fed it all the time. Is that true?
I heard the same joke. Yes. But on the serious side, we also do realize that coronavirus was a real thing. I had an uncle-in-law that passed away from coronavirus, and yes, you said it right. We weren't fearful of it. We realize it is something, and I think we may have talked about this when you were up last spring. Is if we go back into the early 1900s and we think about the way communication was back then, if there was an outbreak of some kind of virus over in Europe or in China or in the western United States, we didn't hear about it. We didn't know about it. So the only thing that we knew if something happened is if our neighbor got sick or if our grandparents got sick. But now with instant communication, we're bombarded with so many things in so many different areas of the world, and our head is just spinning with all the noise, and we're trying to figure out what to do with all this. Whereas at the end of the day, the things that really affect us are what's happening in our neighborhood and what's happening around us is where we can make a difference.
You and I were talking just a few minutes ago on the porch about that you don't vote. Amish people don't vote whatsoever. Why is that?
So the question came up yesterday as well, if we do vote, and I know this may go in contrary with a lot of people's thoughts and the way that we have, you have been taught and thought over the years, but we look at, we're citizens of the United States of America, and a lot of people think we don't pay taxes. Yes, we pay taxes. We pay real estate taxes. We pay income taxes and so on. But we look at it as we are a citizen of a country that is greater than the United States of America. Very similar. We look at it as a two-kingdom vision. We have an earthly kingdom, which we are part of, but we also feel that we are part of a heavenly kingdom. So if we look at it in, let's say, an American citizen moves to Germany. We're not concerned what happens in their government and what their laws are, but we live in their country, we abide in their country, and they're making a living there. That same way we look at it as living in the United States of America. We live here, but we try and block out the politics, the noise of it, and we focus on what we can do within our community. So we prefer to pray for a government. We feel that we're responsible to pray for our government, and primarily that we can continue to live a godly and a peaceable life here.
Yeah, I love that. You rather than vote, you pray, which probably has a similar effect in some ways, or maybe a better effect. He was saying that he's lived through six different presidential terms or different presidents or something like that. And he said in the Cement Bridge Road, whatever you guys live on, there has been, in those 6 different presidents, there has been absolutely zero change on his road. And so that's, in the Amish world, I think that's really all that matters, is what is the change within our community, as opposed to worrying about the national, worldwide. We had to have a special meeting here at our farm about a month and a half ago, because there was this in Nashville. Now I'm in the middle of, as I mentioned, I'm Amishish, and I'm in the middle of a year with no internet, so we're fellow brethren. And so I didn't know about this. Someone told me about it, but there was a big shooting in Nashville, a really, really tragic shooting. It was very close to home here. It was just a couple of months ago. And so we have a one-room schoolhouse here with 12 children. And, of course, news comes to all the mothers, and the mothers reach out to the teachers and the fathers and everybody else. And everybody's really, really afraid. And of course, the first response is we need security guards at the doors, all these sort of things, and the parents wanted to know what we're going to do. So we had to call a special meeting and bring the board members in and sit down with all the parents. And we totally understand their fear, and we talked about all the security measures that we have, but we explained to them we are probably not going to put in bulletproof glass through the windows. We're not going to create a safe room, all those sort of things. But our natural reaction is to respond in fear and try and protect ourselves in every situation. But what was funny about it was, or interesting, is I didn't say too much about it, but all I kept thinking about while we were talking about is when I was up there, I was talking to Marlon, that when the big shooting happened in the Amish community years and years ago, their response was totally different. I think there was 10 little girls killed in that Amish school, and before the afternoon was up, the Amish parents that lost their children had gone to the home of the family of the man who shot the kids and forgiven them, which was so profound and so backwards. That was really all I could process was, should we be saying, how do we protect our children? Or should we be saying, or should we be thinking, oh, how great their wound and their pain must be? How does that happen? Because again, that's such an unusual response that will probably only come from the Amish culture.
The response to that is not a choice that we make the day that happens. That has been taught into us from the day that we're born. Just everyday life that we do. You know, if your neighbor's cows come over into your pasture field or your cornfield, how does Dad respond? How do we respond in our everyday things? And that's the way that we're teaching our children. And I didn't personally know the parents, but that's what I expect, why they were able to respond in that way. And if we look at it, the forgiveness that Jesus Christ taught, we're all sinners, and we're all destined without his saving grace for doom in hell. But with his saving grace, we can have a reward in heaven. So he's forgiven us. So we want to take that in turn and forgive our brethren as things happen. And those things are taught, caught more than taught, I would say. As we live our lives in our daily lives, we see it.
How many of you were in Ivan's talk yesterday? Some of you. Well, I think you talked a little bit about technology. When I met Ivan, I was sitting in his house. There's no electricity. And I said, so what do? You know, what's your job? And I expected him to say, you know, I farm, I raise food, or something like that. And he said, well, I'm in marketing. And so I thought, well, of course you are. You have little white signs that say jams and jellies at the end of your lane. And he said, no, I work in Facebook clicks, Instagram likes, analytics. And I thought, okay, this is different. So explain that technology. Well, I'd like to talk about technology because technology is such a big part of all of our lives, and you guys have limits on it, individually and community-wide. But just this idea that where you have been, when you worked for the other company, now he has his own small, tiny home business. So he has a booth out here. If you guys haven't come to see him, he creates tiny homes and sheds, and he doesn't have the same marketing ability as everybody else. As you see, he can't really get online. It's a long story. So the best way to find out more about him and maybe help his family is go to his booth. But in the meantime, you explain that to me, because you said you do all those sort of things, but you don't actually look at the screen and you don't actually do any of that stuff. There's a middleman. How does that work? How do you do technology for marketing for your business? And most of the Amish are having to do it now too, just to compete, right?
Sure. So you mentioned a little bit. One of the guidelines that we or I live by is I do not own a device that we can surf the World Wide Web. So therefore I can't see Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those big names. I'm sure there's more, TikTok and Google and so on. But we have a business and we need to market somehow, and that's how everybody's looking at it. Now I'm gonna say I have shifted from when we initially met.
Yeah.
Because at that point I was in, we were looking at, I'd get printed sheets of our Facebook feed and how that was looking, and I'd take a look at it and see how things were doing, make decisions based off of that. Same way with Google Analytics, what kind of keywords we were using, search words.
And then you would tell somebody who worked for another company who could get online, an English person who did all the work, right?
Yes. So we basically hired a marketing company, but I was internally the one who was looking at it and making the branding decisions and that type of stuff. So we have a similar setup, but at a lot smaller scale in my company. And I'm actually getting to the point where I'm thinking about just having a website and shutting everything else off, because as a small company, I'm spending quite a bit of money to try and I can't really control it, and there's really hard for me to get so word of mouth is where I'd really like to go, but at this point that's still what we're doing, is hiring a third party, having them do the work, but having them give us reports so that we can make educated decisions and give them direction.
So he's able to use email. He has an email. He has a computer that does email. Somehow within your community that's allowed, email. But if you send him an email and it has a link in it, the link does not work. He cannot get on anything at all. But he told me yesterday he can email that link to someone else who can get on that site, who can take a picture of it and email it back to him, which is like really, really, really slow dial-up. That's where the Amish have moved to. But as you can probably tell, kind of in this world, it's a slippery slope as you start to move on a little bit. For you guys, and I'm sure just like our culture, that we're racing towards ease and comfort and speed, you're inching towards it and you can feel it. Is that a topic of conversation quite a bit within your community, is how do we keep effectively being able to take care of our families and do all these things and move forward, but not too much, technology-wise?
It is a continued topic, and it's something that I think we should even be talking more about. There's some, and like in any culture, you get varied opinions. So there's people who absolutely want nothing to do with it, and then there's people who say we have to integrate some of it, and then there's others that don't see the concerns that some of us see. So there's varied opinions, but there is conversation happening continuously.
Could you say the saying that you said last year? There was this leads to that, which leads to that. Can you share that, and we'll talk about it?
Yes. So there's this saying that we talk about. I've heard it a number of times in our community. If I can get it in my head right now, is I think we would all agree that, I know within our community, and I think in our, in general society, we are probably living in the most prosperous times than we've ever seen.
For sure.
As far as money goes and just the way things are. So there's this cycle, there's this life cycle, and if we look at democracies, if we look at history, prosperity brings greed, and greed brings hate. Hate brings war, and war brings poverty, and poverty brings peace, and peace brings prosperity. So it's kind of that life cycle where, and I'll repeat it again, is prosperity brings greed, greed brings hate, hate brings war, war brings poverty, poverty brings peace, and peace brings prosperity.
Well, thinking of prosperity, you guys have an unusual, you said one of the things that you try to avoid is wealth. You guys have I don't remember exactly how we talked about it last year, but wealth is not a goal. It's not normally a goal. It's kind of become a goal lately. You said there's a lot of disposable income happening. Maybe 50 years ago, 30 years ago, maybe it was, what was the numbers? 80% of Amish families had gardens and worked on the farms, and just a few of them worked building chairs and barns and things like that. Now it's pretty much reversed because there's so much money available. It just makes more sense all the way around. Is that right?
You're right, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me for our community. Now that's going to vary, and if you know, and if you have some neighboring smaller communities, some communities may be more agricultural related than what ours are. But if I remember correctly...
But tell them how big your community... You have like 50,000 Amish
Yes.
people in Holmes County, Ohio. That's a pretty good-sized community.
It is. we say it was the world's largest Amish community. I think Lancaster County, Pennsylvania just surpassed us, which is not a big deal, but they claim they're the world's largest and we claim we're the world's largest, so we'll let you be the judge. But so there was, I want to say we were at like 75-80% of our population in the 50s were agricultural related, and that was farming or and the rest of the 15% were ag related, maybe feed stores or things that were connected to agricultural. And that's the way our culture and community were. I mean, it was the way that we did our life. So for us, I mean, my wife and I, we grew up in a family. She was a family of 12. I was a family of 11. But growing up, being part of the farm, and my parents we were making a living. We weren't rich. We didn't have any extra money. Yes, we'd go, a day to the Sioux here or there, but us and being on the farm, we were part of the responsibility. We were part of making a living. But what happened over the years, and this is where I mentioned earlier that us humans have the tendency of kind of gravitating towards what's easiest. Well, if my dad, or the dad on the farm may have a little secondary shop to the side where he's making chairs or making some furniture, all at once he's making more money on there than he's making with the cows. So it just makes sense. Let's sell the cows. So there we have multi-generational businesses that it's a lot easier to make money, and the shift, I can see a shift going from how do we make a living, what do we need to make a living, to how much profit can we make. And when we go to how much profit we can make, we're chasing the American dream of work hard, make a lot of money, let's retire, take vacations, that type of thing. And we're not exempt from that. We are aware of it, but we're not exempt from it.
Did you have a way of looking at wealth? Wealth is not really an aspirational goal for most Amish people, is that right?
It's not. No, we wouldn't say that we want to be a multimillionaire or anything like that. That's not a goal.
Is that mostly because you know that it comes with problems?
Yes, and probably more of a cultural thing that's just been, some reason, I shouldn't say some reason, but we tend to think of wealth, riches, pride, all the things that come with that, where we have, along with forgiveness that we talked earlier, pride has been a big thing that we are taught is we want to think of ourselves as being we're God's creatures, but also not think of ourselves as too highly of ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
And we see wealth and riches as pushing us in that direction.
Well, I'm going to take a little bit of time and open it up. If you guys would like to, Marlon, you can help us. If you would like to ask some questions to Ivan, if you have anything that you'd want to ask about for him and I, whatever you'd like to do, this is a good opportunity to do that.
Is there a microphone?
We have this microphone. You might have to come up here, or you can yell loud, whatever you think. Unless you don't have another mic, do you, Christian? Yes? How difficult is it for you to raise your children when there's so much prosperity and everything else, as your children and your wife are sitting right there? How difficult is that, knowing that is out there? I'd like to hear that too. I mean, I have some thoughts, but I'd like to hear that.
Maybe you should answer first.
Well, it's like, we're just Indiana and I are in a year of no internet, and that means we also said a year of no movies, so that's no Disney or anything else. So after a little while, it's like she's not even really thinking about it anymore. And so my first thought would be that because of the culture and the way that you live in the community that you live in, we feel it everywhere we go. You probably don't feel it quite as much as we do, or your children may not.
I wouldn't say that we don't feel anything of it. Yeah, we definitely feel. Our children they're not young anymore, but we don't have a finished product. But
do we ever?
I was going to say that. I'm not sure if we do,
Yeah.
but there's going to come a point where we release, where they become independent, where they make those decisions. And one of the things that I talk about is, you all know it a whole lot better than I do, but you see the flashing TVs, you see, I mean, we don't watch movies, but you see a lot of flashing going on, and there's a lot of how do I want to say, enticement out there that's drawing our children's attention. We will not be able to create anything that will compete with that. Therefore, we have to teach and live convictions. And there's going to be a reason, a why behind we do that. So I would say that would probably be my answer, is for us to understand the why and to be able to teach that why, and most importantly, live that why.
That's great. Yes, ma'am. She said, we were talking about Amish community in Ohio and our little community here. Do you know, is the Amish community shrinking, staying the same, or growing? I've heard the answer to this already.
So the people who keep track of our population are saying it doubles every 20 years.
It's exploding. It's incredible. Of course, you come from 11 kids and your wife comes from 12. That's exploding. But I think it's also the retention is probably pretty high, which is so strange to me. You would think, as time goes on, it would just get harder and harder. And I guess because of the strength of conviction within family and parents, I know there's some attrition, some children that grow up and leave the Amish community. But you don't have much. I have never seen an Amish person evangelize. I've never seen it happen. And that's strange, because you're growing, but you're not actually out there evangelizing, trying to get people to sport your beard and get a buggy, right? But it's growing. Is it grow? How is that happening, you thinking?
It's growing from within.
From within.
Yes.
Yeah. You're just not losing a lot, and it's healthy. More questions? Yes, ma'am. What's your feelings about the animals that work on the farm with you and pets? And I know you have a number of those.
Sure. So we view animals, obviously, they're created by God. So we look at them as, if we go back into creation, God put Adam in the Garden of Eden to care for the animals. So we don't see the animals as being on an equal playing field as a human being. We have a soul. We believe the animals do not have a soul. But we're responsible to ethically care for them.
That's great. Yes, sir. I'm just going to say these because we're filming all this. By the way, if you don't know, our team has been filming every single talk in every single tent, including the main stage. So when this festival is over, sometime this summer, we will be able to make available all the talks. Because when you're in this tent, you've missed the talks in the other one. People have been asking, so just so you know. So he said, although you did experience some of the loss during COVID, do you vaccinate? That's the first thing, as a community. And did you achieve herd immunity, et cetera, within your community?
So that answer is pretty much same as everybody else. It was a personal decision if we vaccinate or not. I'm going to say majority of the community did not vaccinate. Did we achieve herd immunity? I want to say probably very close. There was a lot of individuals that had COVID. I had COVID. I was sick for about 2 days, but I was very weak for about 5 days. But I was a healthy individual. My uncle that passed away, he had lung condition, and it's what ended up taking his life. And it ended up, his brothers, this is what was really interesting, because it seemed like it was a weak gene in their family, because 5 brothers passed away in 3 months' time, all from COVID. So we saw it being in family genes and some of those things, but very few people vaccinated.
Yes, sir. Oh, my favorite, a controversial question. Do the Amish own guns? And if they do, can you or do you use them for self-protection?
Great question. We own guns, and we would not believe in using them for self-protection. We believe in a higher power. I know that leads to the next question. You know, what if somebody comes in and is threatening my family and all that? Is I just pray to God that I am never faced with that situation.
Yes, ma'am.
So I had a question for, is it,
Marlon,
yeah,
Mr. Miller.
what are some of the things that you regret leaving the Amish community, and what are some things that you kind of are like, I'm fine with not being about, and would you ever go back to that?
Last year we had a man up here, David Klein, or not David, Mike Klein, who had left the Amish community, I don't know, at like 19 or 20, and so he talked a lot about this. You left when you were very young, but you know people who've left and some of the things that that left older. So it's mostly everything you know is outside the Amish community, but could you talk about what people tend to, your experience? I met a lady the other day down in the Amish community who had left the Amish community, and the things that she grieved over her choice and the things that are good. What's your experience with people that you know, whether it's family members or friends?
That's a really tough question for me as a kid. I was actually 5 years old when Mom and Dad left the church, so it was not my decision. I grew up inside the Amish community, you know, just simply by being, you know, cousins. I've got 120 some first cousins. I don't know. It's half of them are Amish, half of them are not. It's a giant family, right? But it's fantastic, and many people leave for different reasons. I believe one of the best things that happened last year was that same question was asked of Mike sitting up here. Yeah. Do you remember what he said?
Yeah. He said, Mike said, I left the community because I wanted to play football. Remember, he wanted
and he didn't want to look at horses' butts in the field.
And his father is a very, very, very well-known author, Amish author, one of Wendell Berry's closest friends, and so he's surrounded by it, works in the Amish community, but you can tell in my opinion, he has a lot of regrets, but he's also built a wonderful life. Yes, ma'am. I think that's a great question. So she said, when it comes to being more self-sustainable, they do such a good job, and they've done it for a long, long time as a family, communities, just for generations and generations. And as homesteaders, some new homesteaders and some have been doing it for a while, because we have all these conveniences and all this stuff, it could go away. Something could happen. We could lose all these things. And most of us are completely unprepared for it. And she asked, what could we do as people to be more prepared and maybe be a little bit more like you all in that sense?
It's easy for us to do, but a tough question to answer, because one thing that I do know, and this was a couple years ago, but our community, and I'm not even sure what it is in general society, but the Holmes County, which is the community that we're in, they did a study, and it basically came up that our dollar circulated 7 times in our community before it ever left. So we're supporting local businesses when it comes to infrastructure and all the things that are needed. When the recession happened in 2008 and 9, we felt a little bit of it, but we didn't nearly hit it like the rest of the country did, because we were businesses, individuals buying from local businesses. And if it's anything that I would encourage on that side from a homesteading is buy from within the community. And if that community means the geographical community, maybe it's the homesteading community, let's support each other and let's support local businesses so that we can help build up that infrastructure if something does happen.
That's great. I've thought about that question a lot on a sort of a practical side of things, like what would you do if all of a sudden you didn't have any power and water, etc., all those things, we're kind of unprepared for it. So I read a newsletter called the Grovestead. It's a family up in Minnesota, Rory Groves and his wife. And in the newsletter this last spring, they talked about doing this thing called a power down, where they turn off electricity to their house and water to their house. And it was a really inspiring article. So when Indiana was on spring break, for 5 days, I walked. Not only did we not have internet, I told Ivan about it earlier. I went out to the breaker box and I turned off the main power to the farmhouse, and also which turned off our well, so we didn't have power or water from Wednesday morning until Sunday night. Just to experience, I live in an 1870 farmhouse. What would that be like for all that first 100 years or whatever that was going on when they didn't have all that stuff? First 50 years. And it was incredible. It was so much, well, I shouldn't say it was fun. It was so terrible. It was so terrible, and it was so fun. And it was enlightening for me. You know, I could talk about another time. I'll talk about it, but I think those kind of things, that's just for me. On a practical side, is you could experiment. It's like camping, but camping at home. What happens if it just went out? It was really great.
Water is the big issue, right?
Yeah. Yeah, water's a big issue. So when you don't have any water, like I kind of cheated a little bit across the field. There was a hydrant. I ran a couple of hundred feet of water hose across up my porch into my bathroom, and I could pull the top off the toilet and refill it. It was kind of cheating, but also a pain. It was cheating. Yeah. Anyway, next question. Yes, ma'am. She said that on TV, your community is represented more and more. I didn't know that. I mean, I know there's like Amish gangster show or something, but I'm not sure that's your community. I'm not so sure. But maybe there are some Amish shows on TV that are actually well representing. I have no idea, but she was saying that a lot of people are looking to the Amish for advice, right?
So I'm not aware of it as well.
I'm not
as
aware.
As far as the things that I've heard that are on TV that are usually not true. But I'm sure if you're seeing things that maybe are helpful or whatever, but I'd say probably the best one is books. I mean, there's some Amish authors, but not a lot. Something that I have been toying around with doing a book. I haven't just buckled down and done it. Maybe if I have enough people pushing me to do it, I would do it.
We think you should do a book, Ivan. We would like that.
But we do a lot of reading, and we use that medium for a lot of our information. We gather books, and I think that is an area where we are a little weak in writing. We do a one-room schoolhouse, and we're taught the basics, but our English and some of our writing it needs some editorship.
Well, let's speak about that for a minute. Your school, Amish education, stops at 8th grade, right? Which is very unusual and unorthodox to have your children, and for forever, basically, have gone to school till 8th grade. Why does it stop at 8th grade?
We do not see in our culture that we need anything beyond that. Now, you guys may throw rotten tomatoes at me for that, but we feel, the basics, the reading, writing, arithmetic, math type thing, and then being taught at home or as an apprenticeship, getting a job with the neighbor, helping out at the neighbor, those. If we go back and look at the life cycle and we think about the child when he's a baby to we start first grade at 6 years old, they do a little bit of kindergarten, usually a couple days. I'd say a total of maybe 10 days or so the prior year. But then 6 years old, they start kindergarten, and we see those first 6 years as being really, really, really important for that child to be at home and being nurtured and having that foundation of family and culture, mom and dad, and just taking care of them. But then the next 8 years, they're still at home, but they're going to school, the one-room schoolhouse down in the neighborhood. They're getting the basics that they need to survive within our community. Then from there, we'll go into real life teaching where they'll have a job. And it's gotten to be a little bit of challenge with like the local labor laws and stuff if we have 14, 15-year-olds working in shops. So we've been granted some exemptions, but they've also, I mean, there's certain hours that we can work or cannot work if you're under 16 or 18 years old. Does that answer your question?
We're supposed to have buckets here. Where are they? I'm looking for everybody, sorry. Okay, perfect, thank you.
If the question was, is our community happy to help? That's going to vary from person to person, just different personalities. In our community, if you ask, there's very few people that are going to turn you away. But then there's some that are, they're going to answer your questions, and then there's others that will go further and explain further. It's a personal, probably more of a character side.
I read somewhere that one of the reasons, well, you guys are considered the plain people, and pride is one of those things you try to stay away from, to keep down. That when you go beyond an 8th grade education, like in our world, everyone is supposed to go to college. You're supposed to pay a gazillion dollars to send your kids to college and them to have a better life than yours, whatever it happens to be. Doesn't turn out to be very good for any of them. Most of the time, it's very complicated. I mean, it can be good, but it's very complicated. But for you all, I read somewhere that the idea that once you start getting a much higher education, it's not that you don't want your kids to be educated, because the reality is Amish entrepreneurs are some of the greatest entrepreneurs there are. You guys do so many incredible things. But it's that you start to separate out. You don't. The goal isn't to have this person more educated than this person to be an expert in it than this person. You all have the same playing field. I read that is an important part of it.
That brings me to a thought back in, and some of you may or may not know this, but back in the 1960s and 1970s, when the one-room schoolhouses were going away and everything was being consolidated into the public schools, we had our grandparents were imprisoned for not sending their children to public school. So it was a lot of work, and it ended up being in the Supreme Court of the United States until they finally ruled that basically education is a religious thing and we can choose, which is why the homesteading and all of that is available to us all. But back then, one of the chief justices, and I can't quote it exactly, but one of the chief justices of the Supreme Court of the United States quoted this, and he said that the Amish are more focused on teaching to live a quiet and peaceable life, in my words, and the general society is figuring out how to put man on the moon. So it's a different vision.
A couple more questions, and then we'll stop. Yes, sir. Do you plan for retirement? What is? Well, I love that. I love that. You don't really, in general, you don't really have retirement. Maybe you have retirement. Do you plan for retirement? And also, what happens to your old people?
Good question. That's going to be varied from person to person as well. There's some people who have retirement plans. There's companies that do, have IRAs and that type of stuff. But as far as how we take care of our old people, a lot of time, very few of our old people end up in nursing homes. We have what we call a dotty house, which is a grandparent's house, granny flats, or whatever you all call them. But on a farm setting, you'll have a smaller house next to the big house. Grandparents will move in there, and then one of the younger children will take over the main farmhouse and take over the farm. And that's, we've also, with the farming being less and less, the grandparents, we live on 12 acres. But we see ourselves at some point down the road, there'll be a small house on there somewhere, and one of our children will take over the main part there. And it's a blessing for us to be able to. I grew up on my dad's home farm, so my grandpa, he was there all my life. We rubbed shoulders. He had a little woodworking shop. I worked in his woodworking shop. It's that generational thing where we can learn from each other, and I think there's a blessing for taking care of our older people.
Yes, I love that. Yes, ma'am. Are you old order Amish, new order Amish, a little bit of both? What are you exactly?
Technical terms, we're old order Amish.
Yes, sir. Most of your community most of your Amish community is from your family. Do you have people from the outside world joining your Amish community?
It happens, but rarely. And it's a probably the biggest thing is just a challenge to give up the lifestyle that you've been used to and come in and just be part of that. But we do have minimal.
Yeah, so I think there aren't that many people that come from the outside into the Amish community, but to the Amish-ish community, we've got a lot of people coming. Yes, sir. Oh. Yeah, he noted you're using them too. He noticed that in Shipshewana they are using electric bikes, and I know they're in your community too because I've seen them, right? Is that going to revert to cars? When electric cars become, that's a great question. But I don't, yeah. What's going to happen? You are using electric bikes now, not as much pedaling, or at least I see them up there.
So that question is probably the question that is being circulated one of the most in the last year. How is that going to affect us? And if I'm honest, that has probably changed our community more than anything that I've seen in my lifetime. And just from the, like I talked earlier, from the ease of coming and going. So we can't control it completely, and that's something where our community has adapted it, and it's there. We're not changing it, but we try. For us as a family, we have one electric bike. We still like to think of taking the horse and buggy, going as a family. If we need to run down to town to get something, we'll jump on the bike. But if we're doing something as a family, we try and focus doing it with the horse and buggy.
All right, well, I need to stop. But first, I want to mention something. One of the things I love about the Amish community is that they really take care of their own. There's a guy that's a friend of it's probably one of Marlon's cousins, Jerry, that I met last time that I was there. And Jerry's from a family of 11 or 12 or something like that. But his father died really young. Their mom raised all the kids. Their barn burned down. And within a few days, a new barn had been built. 15 years later or something, the barn burns down. Your community takes care of each other. You don't have insurance, right? You guys don't really do insurance the way we do insurance. Your insurance is your community.
It's community funded, yes. And there's nobody making any profit off of our insurance. It's basically a sharing plan, and we pay so much a month or so much a year. It's basically when the fund runs low, we do a collection, and then we pay. And
you take care of each other. So I bring that around. It's amazing, and we don't really do that. But we have an opportunity here today. When Ivan and I were sitting on my porch a little while ago, we were talking about, I don't know how we got to this, but I mentioned that our friends Sean and Beth Doherty, have you seen them this weekend? They have a vendor spot, but their sons are the ones shearing all the sheep. Their sons are butchering the hog. Their sons are the ones raising the timber frame, which, by the way, I'll be over there at 3 o'clock. They're going to raise the timber frame that's going to become my rider's cabin at some point. So that's going to be a real special moment. But Beth and Sean are these incredible folks that live up there in Ohio, too. And when we saw them, when they got here on Thursday evening, they said, I could tell they were a little bit shook up because we found out that their house that they've been living in for 27 years burned to the ground 2 days before they left to come here. And so they raised 7 or 8 children there, and their whole world just shifted. Everybody's okay. No one was hurt, but their house burned to the ground. They got in their car and they drove here. So their sons know how to timber frame. One's an architect, and so when they go home, they're going to have to figure out how to rebuild their parents' house. Now, Sean and Beth are wonderful speakers and wonderful people. And while we're sitting there, I thought to myself, I wonder if our community could help them without asking, without talking to them. And so, come on, stand up here. Our team here has brought some buckets. And what I'd like to do is we're going to send them down the aisle. If you want to come and say hi to Ivan and talk to him, not take a picture with him. If you want to come and talk to Ivan, you come on up here. I think there's at least a little bit of time. Please come see him in his vendor booth. But if you would like to help Sean and Beth with the rebuilding of their house. I already have donated a $10,000 check to get started. So if you would like to help, please see one of these girls with the baskets. They're going to walk around, okay? Please give Ivan a round of applause. Thank you, Ivan, for being with us. It's a blessing. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Marlon, for putting this together.
Thank you.